Hello, and welcome to Draft Day. My name is John Fleming. I am one of the hosts of Draft Day. I'm joined by the little recording thing that we use to record that finally kicked on. So if you hear a robotic voice say now recording again, it's because I had to do it again. Also joined by a couple people here. Joined, of course, by my lovely co-host Jason Bradshaw.
Hello, that's me. I'm here. And yeah, we have the unconventional three-person weave going today as we are also joined by my 11-month, almost 1-year-old daughter, whose name will be redacted because I don't know what kind of people are listening. But if you hear some babbling, she is currently trying to bang on the keyboard and waving at John randomly throughout this time. But yeah, let me be the first to go on record and say, stupid robot. I've defended you for so long, and now you do this to me. You
I
can see how
will
she feels.
So I will honor the not doxing of your child, though I will say that I don't personally agree with the decision to name your child after a genocidal dictator, but obviously she can't help it. That's just the name she was given.
Yeah, little Edie over here. Um, that could almost work as a girl's name.
I actually could see Edie being like a name. I feel like you'd have to wait at least 100 years or so until he's kind of disappeared from any sort of cultural
Yeah.
imprint.
Oh, I wonder how many people now think my daughter's name is Kim.
Huh. That's I didn't really thought all those steps through, but it's okay. Jason and Saddam here are gonna work with me, and we're gonna do a little draft. So we're doing a sports draft, but a little bit of an unconventional one, in honor of the NHL season that technically began a week ago, but for practical purposes started earlier this week. We are going to record an episode focused on the sport of ice hockey. And we are both going to be drafting 6-player teams and do the conventional goalie, 2 defensemen, 3 forward line. But the rule, you pick any player in the history of hockey, but you can only have one player per nationality drafted in the entire draft. So once somebody picks a player from Czech Republic, for instance, no more Czech players can be drafted. Or Czechia, I guess, is what they go
Yeah,
by now.
Czechia
But
would be the technical, or not technical, I believe, just what the country is now known as. But
yeah, I think I'm pretty sure Czech Republic they don't take offense to being called that or anything. But yeah, we'll just
yeah, I mean, as long as we're
whatever.
not like still calling them Czechoslovakia or something, I think we're good.
We're going with the modern conceptions of countries too. So USSR and Russia are different
Yeah,
or not, but I guess it depends what part of the USSR a guy is born in. But most of them are from the modern Russia. Uh, we did agree to what we're kind of calling the Brett Hall rule, which is if a player is born in a country but then represented a different country internationally, then the country that they represented internationally is the one that's considered their nationality. Of course, call it the Brett Hall rule because he is he was born in Canada but played for the United States in international hockey. As you were mentioning before we started recording, you could also call this the Olaf Kolzig rule
yes,
because he was born in South Africa, but later represented Germany. A few other guys like Rod Langway is born in Thailand, I think. There's
yeah.
um, Owen Nolan's born in the UK. There's a few other guys like that, but we're going with international teams. And yeah, I think that hockey is really kind of the only sport that this would truly work with of the major ones. I think for people who have more depth of soccer knowledge, they could probably do it for that, but it's obviously much bigger teams because there's 11 players per side.
Yeah, I would do it.
And
But
I'm
yeah,
pretty sure have there been
yeah.
22 countries represented in the NFL in the entire history of the league? Probably not.
Right. Well, and certainly not at each position if you're trying to fill
Yeah.
out a tackle, a guard, all that stuff. Like
Yeah,
I
you could.
feel like baseball, you might be able to field a team.
It would get really dicey towards the end. Basketball, I think you could do because it's five
Yeah,
on five. It just
if you're just doing a 5-on-5, yeah, you could definitely
yeah.
pass one. Might be a
But
fun
like
one
I
to
think
do
that
actually. Soon, maybe the basketball one with NBA coming up or starting. So
yeah. Well, the talent distribution for hockey is much more, especially in like the modern era, spread among different nationalities.
players.
Like definitely in the early years, it was an almost entirely Canadian with like a couple Americans type league, and now it's still like Canada's the dominant country, but it's not like overwhelmingly so. Like if
Yeah.
Canada plays, the United States in hockey, Canada's the favorite, but it's not like Miracle on Ice level crazy if the US won.
No, I mean and that's the thing. I think we're getting to a point even too, where it's not even just like Canada, US. Like I mean, it's not crazy to see Sweden, Finland, those types of countries win. I think it's an interesting thing, and I know me and you have had the you know discussion many a times that it's even a question now, like because they're gonna have the like what the Four Nations NHL
Yeah,
tournament coming up soon, and it's like you look at a country like Canada, and how does somebody who represents so much and is such a dominant force like not like they may have the worst goalie in the tournament, and it might not even be close.
yeah. There are at least three American goalies that I would like unequivocally take over the Canadian goalie. Like Jordan Binnington could be the starting Canadian goalie. It would not be outlandish for that. And
I
that
mean,
again,
he's.
that might sound like pro Blues bias to somebody that hasn't thought this through, but like look at the list, man. It is
I mean, like honestly, who's he competing with? Aiden Hill, like.
like Darcy Kemper, Tristan Jarry. Like it's not a deep list. It is
But it's funny to see too, like because I know is we'll get into it, but like European, you throw Russia in there, like man, some goalies especially, like how many of the like top tier ones come out of there even? Because even
yeah.
like
I
the
mean,
U.S., like when you're looking at an all time list, like there's not a ton of like American goalies. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to these guys over all these other players.
yeah, because Russia has like Vasilevsky, Sorokin, and what's his face from the Rangers.
Shusterkin.
Sorokin, yeah. Like that is
Yeah.
a insane
Yeah.
trio, and then the U.S.
Well,
has Connor Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger. I think,
yeah.
or Thatcher Demko's American. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
pretty
It's
nuts.
pretty crazy to think about in terms of just like the disparity and I mean historically Sweden's had quite a few shoot,
Yeah,
but enough about just previewing it. Like I say, let's hop into this draft and get it going.
yeah. So yesterday, I told Jason that rather than playing pool for the number one pick, I was going to just grant him the number one pick, and I said this feels like a galaxy brain thing to do, but I feel like there's a tactical argument for going second here, which we can go into as it progresses.
Hmm.
But you're getting the first overall pick, so you can eliminate an entire country.
Yeah, and I was talking to John before we started about his decision to let me go first, and at one, there's a lot of things, but like ultimately, we're drafting a team. You want the best team. You got to draft the best player of all time. I think number one. So I'm gonna take Canada off the board. I'll fill my center one. I'll take Gretzky.
Oh, so you're not taking Yaroslav Halak. Got it. Okay. Wayne
Uh,
Gretzky. He's good.
you mean
Good player.
is it Buffalo legend Yaroslav Halak?
He's not usable in Immaculate Grid, and it makes me very mad.
It's the greatest. If you've never looked up the YouTube video of the Yaroslav Halak Buffalo Sabres tribute, look it up. It's a great 15 seconds that you won't regret. But yeah, I don't really think I need to go too in depth as to why I'm going to take Gretzky at at this spot. It's like there's tons of
Reasonable, yeah.
Canadians. There's a lot of centers, but I figure here too that moving a center to play wing in this team is probably a lot different than trying to make a winger your center, kind of a deal. Um,
Certainly.
so yeah, to me it was sort of a no-brainer, and honestly, it helped me do a lot less research. Where I'm like, I'm just going to take Gretzky at one because then I just didn't have to try to research Canadians, which is a very large portion of the list. So
Yeah. I actually think So I think Gretzky's probably the right pick here. I think you can make a case that in a world where Gretzky just is not available, I think you can make a case that Mario Lemieux would be the next guy to take number one because you just
Yeah,
get a really strong you just get a really strong center, and like most of the greatest centers in NHL history are Canadians. And I
yeah,
remember whenever they had the I think it was an all-century team, like the IIHF did one where they had four guys from like the Red Army team, one Swedish guy, and then Gretzky. And like a lot of like Canadians were getting mad about like how could you only have one Canadian guy here? And it's like, well, you should consider that if you think that they have like a slant towards the Russian guys or the Soviet guys, they still are like, yeah, Gretzky's amazing though. We're not gonna deny that.
yeah. That's a weird thing. Like, and when we talk about Russia, like, because I figure as we go through these countries, we can talk about other good players that didn't get taken for the country, whatever. Canada, a list maybe too long.
I had
I
I had
think,
four guys on my I had four guys on my list for Canada, but Gretzky was the number one of them because
yeah,
I had Lemieux up there because if I were in a position where I were taking somebody to play a wing, I think I'd rather have Lemieux at a wing. But
yeah. No,
Gretzky, I think
I,
it's
I
center is
agree with
the right
that.
call.
Gretzky, I think, has to be your center.
Yeah, I had Bobby Orr up there, and then I figured I would just throw one of the goalies on the list as well. And I decided on Patrick Waugh over Brodeur,
Yeah, I
but
say Bob Rodor. I mean, I guess you could maybe go like a Jacques Plante or something.
like yeah, Terry Sawchuk. I
Sawchuk. Yeah, I
mean,
mean
I
that, and
think
that's the hard thing with a lot of the older guys, because as I was researching, I started with like point shares doing my research, but
yeah,
definitely skews more on the more recent guys with point shares.
yeah, and like also like by point shares, Roberto Luongo I think is the best goalie ever, and it's like I can't do that.
Yeah,
Like
I
he's
mean,
great, but I'm not.
you can't deny that he was good and he had the longevity. He
Oh,
played forever.
yeah, he's awesome, but like
I mean,
he's not
yeah.
the best
I
Canadian
mean,
goalie ever.
well, yeah. I mean, you take peak Canadian goalies. I think Carey Price, maybe if we're talking about at peaks, is in the conversation even in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah. Like Waz always been my guy because like that era of like goalies, it was him, Brodeur, and Hasek. I feel like Hasek had the highest peak, and that Brodeur had the most longevity, but that Wah kind of combined the two. It's always kind of been
and he
my
was also
takeaway.
slightly mental. So like he was
Oh
fun.
yeah,
I mean,
in
he's
contrast to
a
the
dude who
incredibly
literally got.
normal Dominic.
I mean, well, but I mean, Wild literally got himself traded by just like going out the ice saying, "You left me out there to dry. I'm done playing for you.
Yeah,
Trade me." Like, can you imagine what would happen nowadays if somebody did that? Like,
it's a funny move. All right, so
all right,
I am up
now this
now.
pick is going to shape the rest of the draft. John, your first pick.
Yeah. I mean, part of why I wanted to go second was just to get an idea of what approach you were taking. Because, like, there is also an argument for taking, like, the guy that, like, exceeds other guys from that country by the most. But also by taking Wayne Gretzky, that means I can't have a Canadian player on my team. So, like,
Well,
there's,
and
like,
yeah, the other thought is even if I take a guy from another country that's maybe not as good to fill a position, or whatever, if he's playing offense at all, Gretzky inherently makes him better. Like,
yeah.
there's no player in the world or the history of time that you put with Wayne Gretzky and they get worse. Like,
Yeah. Like, for anyone who doesn't remember Pete Gretzky, which, to be fair, we don't really remember Pete Gretzky. Like, I
yeah,
remember him playing, but he was, like, a little past his prime. But, like, it's a little bit like what Sidney Crosby was, where they were just like, we're gonna just throw like just two whatever guys on his line because they're gonna go nuts. It'd be like how Pride of Oakville High School, Pat Maroon
it's
scored 30
that's what I
goals
was
that
thinking
one year because of Connor
with
McDavid.
McDavid. Yeah, it's. I mean,
Yeah.
not to say that he's a bad player, but I think it's what that type of thing's what rocketed Malkin, I think, into being what he was playing on a team with Crosby. Like,
Yeah, I mean Malkin was also a weird case because he was like it's a little bit like McDavid and Draisaitl now, where they play the same position, they play on different lines, but then on the power play they'll play together and it'll just be
yeah,
sick.
yeah. I mean, it's a little crazy, but
So for my next pick, I'm going to keep up the theme of going with really strong countries. I am going to go to Sweden. I am going to take
bastard,
defenseman Nicholas Lidstrom.
damn it.
I think Lidstrom is like pretty clearly, once you take Canadians off the board, the best defenseman that would be out there. And
Yeah,
he just played forever, was awesome, kind of did everything well. Literally, his nickname is the perfect human, which is
yeah,
a thing that's on his Wikipedia page, and somehow no one's like, "Is this really what we're going to go with?" No one disputes it, but yeah, and I think that also kind of fits in with the Gretzky mold of like, I like the idea of my first overall pick because I'm like trying to think of this as being a functional like team, and you get a guy like Lidstrom who just everybody in the world respects and thinks is awesome, and Gretzky's similar, and
sure.
there's some other really good Swedish players out there. Like Peter Forsberg would not be an unreasonable pick in a vacuum, or Henrik
Yeah.
Lundqvist in goal.
Lund-
But
Lundqvist. I think you make an argument to if we're going to say longevity and obviously like real circumstances, Pelly Lindbergh maybe in that conversation in goalie.
yeah,
Uh, of course, Pelly Lindbergh gave up the goal to Bill Baker in the final minutes in 1980 that allowed the U.S. to make the medal run and eventually win the gold medal. So,
that's true. You cannot take a Sedin because you can't take the other Sedin to play with him.
correct.
Could take
Um,
Alex Steen though.
could take Alex Steen. I think Victor Hedman really starts to honestly enter the conversation.
Yeah,
And defenseman, obviously, he's
I,
not Lidstrom, but
yeah. I like because I was kind of like looking through the best Swedish players ever, and I saw him, and I was like, "Huh, that'd be a good guy." This Lidstrom. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
Like,
I mean, well, and Eric
like,
Carlson too, right? Like,
oh yeah. I actually maybe gave more thought to Carlson just because he's a righty as opposed to like you're kind of
yeah,
lefty down, and I was like, I'm not gonna overthink this. Like, if I have two lefty defensemen, but they're like unbelievable, I think I'll be fine.
yeah. I started to think that way too. And stuff. I'm like, I'm not going to worry all that much about it. I think,
I
you
might
know,
use it as a tiebreaker, but I'm not gonna, yeah, fixate on
yeah.
it.
I'd also be remiss to not mention the only player whose jersey I've ever bought in this slot,
It's true,
and that
yeah.
is Blues and Buffalo legend Patrick Berglund. Obviously, nowhere near the real conversation, but I do love him.
That's
Uh,
almost more dark to mention Patrick Berglund as a Buffalo legend than Halak.
well, just because of what happened to him after he went to Buffalo, and yeah,
He did play
if you've
for the
never seen that
Sabres for a
little,
while.
yeah, if you've never seen that like documentary about kind of like what happened with him,
Yeah,
it's heartbreaking, and he seems to be doing better now. Um,
yeah,
but it was at least for me a nice reminder that sometimes like, oh yeah, these athletes are actual human beings, and not just assets to be traded. Uh, yeah, I think we've gone over most of the field because the other thing is, I'll be honest, I didn't put a lot of centers down once I knew I was taking Gretzky. Like I put some
yeah.
down, but yeah, like Forsberg's a good one. Uh, maybe Phillip will eventually make that conversation. I think he's an underrated player, honestly, in today's NHL. But
Right, you're
yeah,
up now.
all right, man, it's where it gets interesting now about who I could take. I
Nathan
really,
Walker is still on the board.
yeah. Say it's fun. Like, has he represented Australia? I'll be
He
honest with
has, yeah.
you. Okay.
Well, because also,
Um,
so I have Nathan Walker on my list. He's high on the list, but I have him on the list. And honestly, even if I were going by nation of birth, he would still be on my list because he's from Great Britain because he was born in
Britain.
Cardiff,
Yeah.
Wales.
Yeah.
Though I mean, I would take Nolan over him, but still, like
Right.
we could exempt one guy.
Yeah, I think I know the country I want to go to, but it's which player do I want to go and fill? I think I'm gonna be weird. I'm gonna get my right winger out of the way. I'm gonna go to Czechia. I'll take Yager, my next pick.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Do I
there's
take him or
two
do I
really
take Hasek?
yeah. It's there's two really awesome players there, so it's just a matter of which one are you gonna
But yeah,
go.
I mean, you're talking. I mean, if we're gonna talk about longevity and just stats, accolades, and hair. Like you can't forget the mullet. Like fantastic mullet. You know, I mean,
Oh yeah,
you're telling me that I can have a line centered with Gretzky and Yager on one side. Like I think we're gonna be okay.
yeah. I think you'll be putting up some goals here. Because like as great as Yager was, obviously playing with Lemieux, imagine if he was playing with Gretzky, like more of a
Yeah,
distributor. Like, oh my
yeah,
god.
that would have been like some hardcore like cheat codes unlocked. But I feel like that's what all these teams are going to become, though. It's like,
Oh yeah, like, well, because like I'm looking at my number 12 ranked like I did like kind of an informal ranking. I'm kind of going over the place, but like my number 12 ranked on here, and it's a
mhm,
player who's like not unbelievable, but it's still like a really good player. Like, I could
yeah,
be like hurting for like decent talent here. Right. So if you're going with Gretzky and Yager, I feel like I have to do
you're gonna
something to
you're gonna
really.
secure the back end.
I am going to secure the back end, but I'm not going to go with a defenseman.
Okay.
But since I can't draft any of the Canadian goalies and I can't draft Dominic Hasek, I'm going to draft the guy that I think you could make a case is the greatest goalie in the history of the world. He was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, but he never played for them. And I very specifically said, we're drafting hockey, we're not drafting NHL. I'm taking Vladislav Tretiak.
He was my number one goalie for Russia. He,
Yeah. And obviously he played for
I,
the USSR, but it counts as the Russia track. But yeah,
yeah, I think uh, I love this pick. Like I was considering doing that with my next pick, and I'm so glad that you've done this. So it's
yeah.
your pick. I'll
So
let you gush about it.
yeah, so Tretiak obviously is going to be less famous than a lot of the other guys on here to American audiences, especially just because he didn't play in the NHL through no fault of his own. Like, by all accounts, and like according to everybody who ever played against him internationally, this guy was like amazing. Like, there's a reason that the 1980 Soviet team obviously lost to the United States, which is partially on Tretiak, but also mostly on the other guy because he
Yeah,
got benched after the first period.
I'm gonna say it's mostly on Victor Tikhonov, the coach, for
Yeah, I
pulling
mean,
him.
yeah, one of the most insane maneuvers ever made, but a guy who I think is just like an absolutely superior goalie. Everyone, like all of these like Canadian guys, you know, even the ones that were like kind of like virulently anti-Russian are like, oh, this guy rules. Like you could go to like Bobby Clark or one of those guys, and he'd be like, yeah, Tretiak was like terrifying to play against, and like honestly, there were a few other like Red Army guys I think you can make a case for. Like I think Prime
Off.
Slava Fetisov, and yeah, there's
Yeah,
and Fetisov obviously played in the U.S.
yeah,
eventually, but
eventually, but far past his
little
prime. Yeah, I think.
he was
Yeah,
pretty
Boris
good though. Like
Mikhailov.
he was pretty terrifying in those Red Wings teams.
Oh yeah, he was. I mean, yeah, yeah, the teams that were just loaded with Russian talent. I mean, obviously a guy that if I really wanted to do that, me and had you not taken Tretiak here, my next pick probably would have been Ovechkin because holy crap, that
I was
top
gonna say,
line.
yeah, like you
That'd
have
be a natural right, left, and center too.
You
So
have Ovechkin and Yager being centered by Gretzky. You don't have to even bother putting a defense out there. It's like we're just gonna score more goals than you. Fine.
but like that, I think what you get beyond Tretiak. I mean, who's is Hobby Bulin maybe the best Russian goalie after Tretiak?
Uh, that doesn't seem right, but I mean, Bobrovsky probably is going to the Hall of
Yeah,
Fame, so he's
yeah. I
got.
mean, Bobrovsky would be up there. I mean, you had yeah, and obviously some of the younger guys that we've talked about. Shesterkin's maybe the best goalie in the NHL right now, or probably
Yeah.
is.
I mean, if Vasilevsky's not a Hall of Famer yet, he's gonna be like in that
Yeah,
discussion soon enough.
yeah, for sure. I guess I'd be remiss not to mention my favorite non-blue of all time here in Sergei Fedorov.
Oh,
Uh,
sure, yeah.
in terms of players from Russia. You know, defensemen. It's a weird thing with defensemen in Russia, though. Like that was a tough one for me to come up with a real deep list that I
Yeah.
loved. Like Sergei
There's a reason I
Zubov,
had
Sergei Gonchar. Like,
yeah. There's a reason I had Fetisov and didn't look back. I just was like, I'm not gonna
yeah,
like
yeah,
talk
no,
myself into
for
like
sure.
Andrei Markov or somebody. Yeah. All
Uh,
right, you are up.
I am up. Oh, This is where it starts to get funny. I think it's interesting that through our first 4 picks, we haven't taken an American either. I think that's
Sure.
more
I
strategic than
think,
anything.
yeah, I think the thing with the Americans is I don't think there's like an unbelievable you can't not take this guy, but there's like a decent depth of them. And it may end up honestly coming down to which of us feels like we find a guy that fits a need.
Yeah, and it's yeah, and that's why I'm gonna go to an odd country. So I'm gonna take a guy who's a natural centerman. That honestly, he's a guy that I would maybe even potentially play at center and move Gretzky to the wing for my
Okay.
team. But I'm gonna say I'm gonna take somebody from the country of Slovenia.
I wonder who it could be.
Yeah, who's gonna be? I will be taking, if you know anything about hockey, Andrzej Kopitar with my next pick. I'll fill out the top line here because what Kopitar brings to it's like obviously good player all around, but the most defensive minded. So if I have him playing center, he gives me
Yeah.
more defensively from the forward position. And we were talking about this, like this is just because it gets a country out of the way where if you didn't want him, like there's nobody else you're going to take from
No.
Slovenia.
I think there were literally two other players in NHL history from Slovenia, and neither of them did anything of consequence.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a guy who I mean, when the Blues were battling with the Kings there in like the early 2010s a lot and stuff, like I wanted to hate this guy so bad, but you really just like can't because he's just good. He doesn't really seem to like run his mouth or anything. Like, and everybody just like, I think he's gonna be one of those guys. The day he retires, they'll start making his bust to put him in the Hall of Fame. I really do. Um, Multiple Cup winner. So
He had a hat trick last night, so in the hot hand.
I'm gonna say at yeah. How old is he now? I mean, like, it's not like he ain't young.
Yeah, like 37, 38 probably. He's been
Let's see.
around.
Andrei Kopitar is 37. But yeah, I mean, just like I said, you know, a guy who could have the offense but has the all around, and frankly, just like none of the other choices that I'm like was looking at on my list. I'm like, I got to go with that one right now. So I'll round him out with my forwards as opposed to taking maybe an American winger that would score a little more something. So
Now I'm
my
like, huh,
daughter
I should probably take.
seems to not love that pick. You think I should
Well,
go
now I'm like,
Liam?
I should probably take a forward, huh? A forward would be good right now.
Well, yeah, that I mean, it's funny because like my forwards are going to be like incredible, but my defensive might be, whereas your defensemen are, you're if you have the best defenseman and like you said, maybe the greatest goalie of all time. So
Yeah. So I am going to go with I am going to go with a forward because even though you're not going to take this player, there's somebody else on here that I'm a little bit worried you might want to grab and block from taking this country. I am going to go with Teemu Solani from Finland. Really is between him and Yari Curry for me, but which obviously I wasn't worried about Curry either. But Pekka Rinne was on the board as a potential goalie, or Rask, I guess, for that matter. But
yeah,
it's like,
you do know my affinity for Pekka Rinne, so
yeah, I was like, this is a little too like I don't know that you were going to go with him next, but I didn't want to take the risk. Teemu Solani obviously played forever, very major goal scorer. Other players seem to love him, so keeping up the chemistry along with Lidstrom. I don't really know what Tretiak's personality is like, but he's a goalie, so it doesn't really matter. But
yeah,
Solani is a guy that I would honestly trust on either wing, though primarily a right wing. And yeah, so
yeah. I think I didn't go with him because he was before I took Kopitar. I was obviously he was in my mind for the slot, but him and Yager are both primarily right wingers.
yeah, and
Not
I
to
think
say
that
that they
Kopitar
couldn't play
also
off.
gives. Yeah, I mean, not that like Gretzky's a bad defensive player, but like you getting Kopitar in there definitely improves the defensive acumen of your forward group in a way that Solani wouldn't. But Solani's also just like a huge goal scorer. So
also just thinking what it would look like if I had a line of Gretzky, Solani, Yager. I
Oh,
mean, to be fair, it's
yeah,
not like Kopitar, Yager, Gretzky is like
yeah,
not scary, but
yeah. It's weird because like we're talking about Kopitar like he's Guy Carbonneau or something, or like
yeah,
he's like a checking like he scores a lot. Like he's
yeah.
really
I
good
mean,
offensively.
no, I mean, yeah. The Finnish Flash, maybe one of the better nicknames in hockey of all time, in my opinion. I think. Um, but yeah,
And
I
he has
mean,
kind of a
literally,
weird he has this weird statistical trajectory because he scored 76 goals his rookie year and then never like came all that close to that again. But he was like consistently scoring, 40s and 50s, like basically until he was like in his 40s.
yeah, he was, and I mean, essentially, such a big part of when you think about like the Ducks franchise. It's,
Yeah,
he's
he's
the first guy you think of.
like undeniably the greatest player in the history of the franchise. Somehow was not the guy that lifted the cup for them, nor the guy that got the first handoff for them, which is very strange. But
You know,
he
all I
wasn't
can
a
say is,
Niedermeyer, so he didn't qualify.
well, when the Blues won the cup, Chris Thorburn was like the third person to lift the cup, so like third or fourth. So
Yeah, I don't think
it,
Chris Thorburn is quite as good as Temu, but
well, that's what I'm saying is somebody
I
not as
know.
good as. But now his name is unfortunately just a Chinese Amazon knockoff, so not spelled the same. Really,
All right, you are up.
I am up, and I guess I'll go American here. I'm gonna go to defense. I'll take Chelios,
Okay.
first defenseman off the board.
Yeah. I was gonna go a different American had you not taken him, so good call.
Yeah, I think I think overall, especially with getting Kopitar, Chelios, has some offensive mind in him. Maybe not the most, he's not Lidstrom in terms of shutdown defensiveness. Um, but I think if you ask most people, they probably say he's the best American defenseman of all time. But
Or
you know,
Leach, I think, but
yeah, those were the two guys I had
I
down. Was
would,
do I take Chelios or Leach?
yeah, I would
You
lean
know,
towards Chelios.
um, yeah, I mean, some other positions, I think, like I honestly considered Kachuk for a winger when I was thinking to fill out the line because he'd be a natural left winger. Madonna at center. Goalie's an interesting one when you look at the best American goalies, like in terms of longevity.
Yeah, there's just
Like,
not anyone that's of that
uh, do
level.
you know who the highest by win shares American goalie is, or point shares? Not win
Um,
shares.
I'm gonna guess Ryan Miller.
It's Ryan Miller. Number two is Tom
Okay.
Barrasso.
Wow. Yeah. Like Van Beesbrook and Quick could probably be up there, but yeah, it's and like
Yeah,
they're all good players. Nobody that I'm like dying to.
yeah, none of them. It's like because it's funny for me because maybe it's the age that we are. For Mike Richter is always going to be like the American goalie in my head because just when I was
Yeah.
growing up playing games when the Olympics were on and stuff, he was the guy. But like, oh yeah, you like that pick, huh?
Got approval from Saddam.
I say I got to keep coming up with like dictator names. Thanks.
Yeah, this is a
Yeah, I think I think I'm still in an okay spot. Like with my team,
yeah.
goalie's going to
I
get
agree.
interesting for me. I think there's some other players I think still.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to change my pick from the guy that I had initially written down here. I am going to go to I'm going to go Leon Draisaitl, Germany. I don't think you're going to take Philip Grubauer, but on the off chance that you like Philip Grubauer a lot more than I think you do, I can't risk losing out on Draisaitl because otherwise my center is not going to look very good, relatively speaking. But yeah, Draisaitl obviously is an all-time great player who just happens to not be the best center on his own team. But I think is clearly the best German player in the history of the NHL at this point. And yeah, that's
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Grubauer. I mean, honestly, I probably like Kolzig over Grubauer goalie, but
oh yeah, true.
um, yeah, I
I
mean,
think I did.
Draisaitl.
I think I did the thing. I think I forgot to consider Colsey because I did the thing where you look up like by nationality, and because of the South Africa thing, I just
Oh
omitted
yeah,
him.
yeah, he's
Okay.
yeah, but Germany, an interesting one. I think be remiss not to say the name of a guy who has a you know game-winning Stanley Cup-winning goal.
Yeah.
Uwe or
They.
Yui, as us Americans love to call him, Uwe Group. Um, it's a country I think that's more up and coming with guys with Stutzla. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm sure I
I
know
was
there's
trying to
other
like.
guys.
I was trying to convince myself of Tim Stützle being a reasonable pick, and I was like, his best, and I mean absolute best case scenario is he turns out as good as what Leon Draisaitl currently is. So yeah, I'll take the one that I know is like a superstar. And at this point,
Yeah,
we have like both of us have drafted four guys each who are all either Hall of Famers or will be Hall of Famers. A
yeah.
couple more countries out there that I think are fairly ripe, but then I think our last picks are going to be interesting, is how I see it.
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
I have a feeling I know who you're going to take here, but let's see it.
Yeah, so it's like obviously I'm looking at defensemen and goalie. And frankly, I'll be honest, some of my stuff now I'm like trying to look here, but I think when it comes to defensemen and the countries left, I think there's an obvious guy to go with. I know it probably pains John a little bit that I'm going to take him because I know how
Yeah,
much he
I'm
loves
trying to
him.
hold it in right now.
But I'm going to take the big boy at 6'9". I'll take Chara from Slovakia.
Yeah, that's absolutely the right call, and that's the guy I was going to take before I got nervous about
As
losing
much as it
Draisaitl.
hurts to not take Yaroslav Halak here, you know,
Not a completely unreasonable pick at this point, but
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
in terms of the countries left with goalies, and I'd say he's probably the best Slovak goalie out there. I mean, Peter Budaj may be the only other one that could be a contention.
sure. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm looking right now at my board, and I think there's like a very clear and very obvious guy for you to take with your last pick as your goalie.
unless you
And
block it.
there's a part of me that's tempted to block it, but I don't really want any of the guys I could pick instead of him. So
Yeah,
the reason I left Chara for you is I'm not going to be that heartbroken about taking from Switzerland. I'm going to take Roman Yossi as my other defenseman.
yeah, yep.
And
He
yeah,
was.
I
Those
think
were the two guys.
yeah, I think that was kind of part of why I did. I was like, well, I'm probably going to end up with Yossi, who I would want slightly less than Chara, but like Roman Yossi's also really good, so not hurting too much there.
Yeah,
This does block you from taking Jonas Hiller, which doesn't seem like it should be a relevant thing to note, but would not
yeah,
be completely off the wall. But yeah, Yossi is, I think, like far and away the best Swiss player that there's. I mean, I have like Nico Hischier and Kevin Fiala on here, but like Hischier could get there, but at this point, I think Yossi is the clear number one from that country.
yeah. I think Yossi, you know how much I like him. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I think consistently maybe the most one of the more underrated guys in the league, or and maybe just from a I don't want to say media standpoint, but like guys, the average fan doesn't know who they are. People who know hockey know him.
Yeah. Well, I think that he and Hedman are kind of two guys that have really like been consistently good for a while that are of like roughly the same generation. I think Yossi might be a year or two younger, but they're like guys who are like not like Ryan Suter or somebody who's like clearly like all due respect to his goal last night, but like mostly like kind of old.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
those guys are still around, and I think that all of the players that I think Yossi's probably a Hall of Famer. I think all 10 of our guys are going to be Hall of Famers when all is said and done. That's probably not going to be able to be said about necessarily our next picks,
our next picks.
unless I'm really missing somebody. But yeah,
Yeah, it's for me. It's when I look at goalie in the remaining countries, there's really only two choices.
that might be generous.
Well, I think in terms of like, I think I'll go with the one that's still active. I think
Yeah,
of the two, I'll go to Denmark and take Freddie Anderson. Um,
I as much as I thought about taking Nick Ehlers just to screw you over,
so,
yeah,
do you know who I would have ended up taking had you taken Ehlers?
was Urbe?
Yeah,
He was
Artis
like
Urbe would be the next
from
one.
Latvia, yeah.
The guy who like never cleaned his pads and they were always like disgustingly black.
Yeah, so yeah, Freddie Anderson, a good player. I think that now that he's not under the Toronto like media microscope, I think that people are like properly respecting him as like a good goalie. He's not like barring some sort of incredible run in his later years, not going to be a Hall of Famer, but I think he's going to be remembered as a like rock solid goalie. So, if you have Zdeno Chara and Chris Chelios, which you got the lefty righty thing, which I don't have. I have two lefties, but you got
Yeah,
that. You got the Kopitar Gretzky Yager. You don't need Freddie Anderson to do that much for you.
yeah. I mean, he's just gotta, you know, and maybe when our teams play, I get, 1980, that one game Tretiak when Evan Prudence gave up 2 goals in the first period.
Oh God, I'm gonna have to get like Cristobal Hewitt to be my backup goalie to bring in.
All you a. I'll go
He,
with
he was on my he was probably would have been my third guess
I'll
behind
take.
Anderson and
I mean,
Urbe. It
I mean,
thinned out.
I would have thought, go with like blues legend Reinhard Davis from Austria.
Oh my
He was
oh my
like
God.
cousins with one of my brother's best friends, so like I met him multiple times at their house.
Wow.
Um, and I remember it being like so cool when he played and being like, "Oh, you met this random guy who played? I think he played like 25 games in the NHL or something. Like 25 more than you played, jerk."
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So with the
All right.
last pick, I actually think that it's like pretty obvious who my pick is here. I'm gonna go with Austria, like you mentioned. I'm gonna take Thomas Vanek,
Sounds back. Yeah.
um, left winger. I Is he still active or did he just retire? He's like
Uh, I don't think
he's
he's
kind of
active
on
anymore.
that. He's bounced around for a while. Let me check what's going on with Thomas Vanek.
Sorry, I'm looking at
Um,
him. Thomas Vanek.
he
He
appears to
is
not be active anymore.
a former
He hasn't
freshman.
played since 2019. Wow. I would have bet anything he had played since 2019, but that apparently was the last time he
It's all
played.
right. I just, in my mind, he also just like played his entire career with the Buffalo Sabres.
He
So
bounced around a lot. He was a
he did.
real and like he was a good player, but he was never like the level of player that you're like, oh, we need to lock this guy down forever. I mean, his longest
Yeah.
run was definitely with the Sabres, but had some time with the Islanders, Canadians, I think everybody has a Panthers run at some point in their career. Yeah, played over 1,000 games, 789 points. I think he's clearly a step down from like Draisaitl and Solani in terms of the capabilities of my forward line, but is a guy who, especially at his peak, you would say is like a first wing or a first line player.
Sure.
Like it was between him or like I guess Matt Zuccarello probably would have been my alternate, even though he's more of a right wing. Like
Yeah.
Antoine Roussel, like I'm
Yeah.
not necessarily loving these guys either, but
Yeah. That's Vanek's the right. Yeah, I think
you know,
it's we talked about Latvia and stuff, and like I almost went with like a goalie earlier, and then was gonna fall on like Ozelich, maybe.
yeah, Ozolinsh was definitely on my list, but I'll have to settle for having Nick Lidstrom and Roman Yossi.
Roman Yossi, yeah, you poor
Yep.
thing.
Yeah, you'll have to settle for having Chris Chelios and Zdeno Chara.
Zdeno Chara, yeah. Which boy, the dichotomy in those two guys in terms of like size of defenseman.
Yeah, in terms of like I definitely think of Chris Chelios as being a little bit of a meathead. And Zdeno Chara is apparently a very smart guy, so I can see it working though.
Yeah, I mean,
Not unreasonable.
but yeah, no, I think I feel like this draft went about as good as we could have asked.
Yeah, I'll do. There's literally one player that I haven't blacked out because I blacked out the countries as they went that I have not mentioned by name, which was from Norway, Espen Knutsen.
I mean, why not?
That was going to get
Yeah.
dire if it had come to that.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, you get into some of these real interesting, you know, countries where like, I mean, it's like, did you know that there's like, you know, there's a Jamaican who's played in the NHL, like
Oh,
Graham Townshend, born in 1965. I don't know,
sure.
but yeah, it's like it's really interesting though, like why, like how some of these other countries that are surrounded like by a lot of these like hockey playing nations like aren't more into hockey. I do think that Germany is an up and coming country in hockey. I think they've got a. Is it the kid that's like the presumed number one overall pick coming up? German.
I do not know. Maybe seems plausible.
Yeah, but it's. I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see because like we've definitely seen. I don't know. I guess a little bit more evening out, and it's in terms of playing in the NHL. With these other countries. Because I think it's an interesting thing. I think definitely on paper, if you put I think Canada would have the best team, but it's even the thing with Russia where now like even some of their top players still play in the KHL. They don't come over play
Yeah,
in the
that's true.
NHL.
They'd be a little bit more of a mystery, I suppose.
Yeah, but yeah, Finland, Sweden, the US, Czechia, like I mean even like Switzerland now, most of their roster is probably NHL guys. Like,
Yeah, probably. And you got guys like Heisha. You have guys improving,
Yeah,
certainly.
absolutely. And I think the UK is trying to build up their hockey stuff too. I think in terms of you know,
They got to try to claim Nathan Walker as their own, steal him
I
back
mean,
from Australia.
I don't think that would be too hard to do, but like, I know, like on the women's side, like Japan is starting to try to become like a women's hockey hub. So
Yeah, I feel
I don't
like
know.
Japan's going to be held back in terms of NHL for as long as their most famous player ever's fictional character. It's too bad.
You know,
All due respect to the legacy of Taro Sugimoto, but they should probably get a real guy.
yeah. I mean,
There have been
even
some real Japanese players, but they just aren't of much note.
yeah. I thought you were gonna go, even though he played for the U.S. and the only tournament that I've seen him play was the Mighty Ducks own Kenny Wu. but he played for the U.S., I guess.
Also, is that I'm trying to think of what nationality Wu is. This
It
is
might be
the
Chinese. Wu might be Chinese.
is it WOO or WU?
WU, which I believe is a
Okay.
Chinese.
I was thinking it was Korean. This is okay. We gotta end this before we just
Yeah.
sound.
Before we
Well,
get,
luckily, I don't think we sound problematic. I think we sound incredibly stupid, though. So, which I
well,
don't
it's
want to be
hardly the
considered that.
first.
Like, I'd rather be considered dumb than canceled, but I'm not really thrilled about either. So, should I recap the teams?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right, Team Jason. In between the pipes, we got Frederick Anderson from Denmark. Defenseman, we have Zdeno Chara of Slovakia, Chris Chelios of the United States. And then up front, I believe you decided that Wayne Gretzky would be playing left wing, Anze Kopitar would be playing center, Jaromir Jagr would be playing right wing from Canada, Slovenia, and Czechia, respectively. Uh, I will have Vladislav Tretiak from Russia as my goalie, Nicholas Lidstrom of Sweden, Roman Josi of Switzerland as defense, and then Thomas Vanek, Leon Draisaitl, Teemu Solani of Austria, Germany, and Finland as forwards. Hey, we're gonna get an episode in under an hour. This is
Hey,
exciting
man.
news for us as
This
long-winded
is,
people.
yeah, I feel like this is one, like, when you're dealing with all-time greats, you don't need to go into, like, this is their career stats. Like, nah. Like,
Yeah. Like I don't need to think about Thomas Vanek. I just say the name and I just move forward.
I mean, and peek behind the curtain, we're also recording this, like, on Friday morning. Like,
Yeah, we're
not
both
like
off work
normal
today.
where it's, yeah, when it's not like normally we're recording and going late. And it's like, oh, we'll start at 7 and at night. But
I drink during a lot of our recordings. I'm not drinking during this recording. Little early for me.
say as I'm holding a under 1 year old this whole podcast, I am also not drinking. Uh,
Probably for the best.
yeah, but you actually did pretty good, sis. I'm proud of you. But
Yeah, she's
anything you want to say for your
Osama
debut?
bin Bradshaw is crushing it. He's not a dictator. He's just a bad guy in different regards. It's fine.
Yeah, just
All
please,
right.
my wife, please don't listen to this episode.
I gotta be honest. If the one episode that she decides she's gonna try out is this one, I could not even begin. Like to Jason's wife, you know that we have like ones about like music, right? Like we have things that are at least a little in your wheelhouse. But
True, but she enjoys
let's
hockey though.
yeah, let's call it a day.
So,
Would you like to promote things?
sure, follow me on Twitter at Draft Day Dadshaw. Follow the pod at Draft Day Pod. Who knows? Maybe I'll put a picture of me and the baby girl. I took one before we started recording on the. Maybe I'll drop it on that feed to be like, post us. And then you want to
She is
promote?
looking. I will say she is looking particularly adorable right now. Like, and you know me, I wouldn't lie. If your kid was not looking adorable, I would just not mention it.
Oh, he's waving
Waving
to
to her
you.
right now. I think that might have been a wave back. Can't quite tell, but
So she's there. There you go. There's your wave.
there we go. There we go.
But
All right.
yeah, where can the peeps find you? What are you up to now, John? Now that baseball season for you is effectively over from a writing standpoint.
Yeah, but also the playoffs are awesome this year, so I'm like more into baseball now than I've been for months. You can find me at JohnJF125, STLBullpen.com. I actually did write a baseball thing about the Cardinals like a week ago, so you can check that out. Um, you can listen to this podcast, one, wherever you're listening to it currently, but also you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. There's other places as well. I don't really know where people listen to podcasts, but they're there. So, all right,
Yeah,
let's call it a wrap.
yeah.
At
We'll see if the robot can end the podcast on time. You worthless. Look, no, gonna be
this is an
positive.
episode where I could theoretically like stop recording and then like go up and get like breakfast from a fast food place. That's wild. The whole new era of draft day. But enough fast food talk. We did enough of that last episode. Bye, everybody.
See you guys.
So I hit stop recording and it said this interaction failed. That would not be good.
Come on, robot.